I'm ready.
All right.
Hit me.
Boys and girls, Corrine Barraclough in the house. How are you doing?
Hi, I'm good. How you doing?
Good. Well, it's one of you're one of the people who I've been talking to occasionally off the camera. It's good to have you on the camera, because you're gracing other people's TV shows, but you haven't yet been in the Carnage House. I've been a bit jealous of that, but we finally got you. So that's something.
Here I am. Hi.
Now you were well. Let's talk first. What have you been doing in isolation? I suppose as a writer and as I guess a Sky News contributor, columnist to a range of newspapers, including Spectator and Daily Telegraph, that potentially, you might not be able to work at this point.
I'm still working. I feel very lucky to be still able to pull in a little bit of income, because I know that obviously thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of people are losing their job. Every time you switch on the news, it's like another household name was closed. I think today we had David Jones, didn't we? So like it's just one after another after another, snowballing. Yeah. So I feel very lucky. My whole life, to be honest, is set up for kind of worst case scenario. So I don't, like, I know I'm going to sound 103 when I say this to you, but I don't understand how people get themselves in so much debt and after paying all of that. I just don't work in that world.
Yeah.
I don't live beyond my means.
Yeah. But you're doing pretty well, though. You must have... Well, you were originally a magazine, the celebrity magazines and stuff. That was your gig before you made it into political journalism. How did that transition happen from doing celebrities to politicians? Do you reckon, is it more boring or is it more exciting?
You just used the word doing, which in a previous life would have had a completely different meaning.
Yeah. You're allowed to slip up or two.
Yeah, I have a bit more Redbull. I started off in actually teen mags. It was a teen girls magazine that I started on, doing real life stuff, and then into women's mags, and then I got picked up for the Daily Mirror by Piers Morgan, and then I went to New York, did a stint on Star magazine, which is like a celebrity weekly, back to London, and then to Sydney. And then, so I was editor of NW magazine, and I did that for 5 years, about 5-6 years. And I was really at the top of my game. So I won an award, and I really felt like I'd taken that brand as far as I could. Got out of there, moved to the Gold Coast, went freelance, and for the first time ever, I guess, at that point, so this is now 6 years ago, really started... I had never had an interest in politics before then. So it was the first time when I wrote from the heart, because I wasn't a big brand anymore. I could actually work out what I believed in, and what I certainly didn't believe in, and who was a complete clown out there, and got stuck into that. So before I even made the move into the Daily Telegraph, I wrote a couple of pieces for the Daily Mail Australia. Like I did a piece about Chris Gale when that was all kicking off, you'll remember, and then I did a piece about Eddie Maguire again. Yeah, don't blush. Because I get, the Chris Gale thing was really interesting, because I did a piece for the Daily Mail Australia, and that got picked up, and I did a few radio interviews at that point. And that was probably the first time when I realised that actually much as I was speaking truths, they were truths that people did not like to hear at all.
I thought Chris Gale was totally above board. I didn't see anything wrong with him asking the reporter,
I didn't either,
saying don't blush. I thought it was quite nice.
Honestly, and I guess I was coming from a point of, I've been in my previous life, in London, in New York, I've interviewed loads of celebrities. I've been at plenty of gigs and after parties, and some stories that I will share, some maybe we'll get to. There are all sorts of shenanigans. And so for him to what I thought was just slip in a compliment. I thought the world literally went screeching mad over something that I'd heard a million times. And I remember I was doing an interview with radio in England, BBC Radio, and they were saying, do you really think that a woman should have to put up with this at work? And I just felt like it was talking a completely different language. It was not at all my experience of being a working journalist. You know, I'd been a journalist for 10, 15 years. I've been hit on by plenty of people. It's completely up to you whether you go down that path and how you react. And she made, do you remember, like she literally like turned the mic, and she was visibly, I think, pissed off. Let's be honest. She was visibly furious, and I just didn't understand it. Because if I'd have been in that situation, I would have handled that whole thing very differently. Well,
you can tell me whether I'm wrong about this, but I've got a gut feeling that if that was the standard of how you asked a girl out or give a girl a compliment, of being like direct, a bit playful, whether she's at work or not at work, I think women on the whole would be a lot happier than the other treatment they get of how they get asked out. I think if that was the standard, that's a pretty good platform to work off for girls and boys.
Yeah, and well, and isn't it, that's how lots of people meet. Like you don't know. He probably didn't know that she was engaged, or, you know, whatever she was. That's not part of it. I don't know. It just baffles me that any woman could be insulted by being paid a compliment. I think he said something about her eyes, or how much he'd been looking forward to interviewing her. Like that's. Right. I just thought it's nice. I thought it was nice, yeah. And plus he's hot, so you know. Like, just take a compliment.
He's a good-looking rooster, Chris Gale.
He is.
So then you moved into political journalism.
Well, I started writing for the Daily Telegraph, and so
you do also some lifestyle commentary as well.
Yes. So at that point, I was really finding my feet, working out what on earth I believed in, and what I didn't. And I've got a brother who I adore, and we grew up with a single mum, and there was never any playing one child over another. We were both completely equal. So the whole, we need to start telling boys to do this and women think this, it was just completely alien language to me. It's just not true. It's not the reality of how. And I was ticking all the boxes of what an actual, sorry, we're kind of coming into the feminist territory now. So, you know, like I would tick all the boxes of what makes a strong woman. My mum left school when she was 14. She worked in a factory. We had nothing. And I worked my ass off. I worked for everything that I got. I got myself a really good career. I made huge international moves. I got rock solid promotions. I stood on my own 2 feet. And I got dicked over by a few blokes along the way. But that doesn't mean that I suddenly then start making sweeping statements about all men. It really, you can tell, because I'm getting cross about it, you can tell how much it winds me up. But I wrote a couple of pieces about what I would say is true equality. And the more I kind of went down that rabbit hole, that fierce left activist pack who really do own the media in this country, they just got me blacklisted and banned from a whole stack of places, and that just made me more determined.
So did that affect your work at like the Daily Telegraph, the criticism in the comments? And
look, I had a really good run at the Daily Telegraph. I had a string of page 13s, which is, you know, like kind of up there in opinion pages.
Right,
and I was
so
on a real...
You're looking around, it's like, bro, you're page 31, get to the back of the line. No, I'm page 13.
Pages matter. Well, coming from England, I was just glad that I wasn't on page 3.
Oh, really? What's on page 3?
Page 3, that was girls with no tops back in.
Oh, right.
Yeah, you see, you're too young to know this. English newspapers, it does sound slightly crazy. English tabloid newspapers used to have a girl with her bits out, on page 3.
That's why they were so popular. See, if
Now,
newspapers had that on page 3, they'd probably come booming back into fashion. But possibly.
That's probably pushing it a little bit too far.
Might be worth a try. I mean, how can they compete with me?
So look, at that point, I guess I was really, I kind of had to make a decision. I had to decide whether I wanted to keep on just being a writer, so getting lots and lots of writing work where you're not known for particular views, or you have to go, no, that's bollocks. I really, really believe in this, and I'm going to stick my neck up and I'm going to continue down that path. So I chose that.
And has that been a good decision for you?
It's hard. Look, I'm not going to lie. It's really, it's definitely, it's tough. It's hard when you're not going with the mainstream narrative, you know, and I think the danger, I think, which I realised very early on, you know, when I wrote a couple of things, like I said, this is probably about 5 years ago. I wrote a piece about domestic violence, and I wrote a piece from the heart about we're never going to make any progress unless we remove gender from this discussion. And I got death threats after that piece from that far left feminist pack. And that really startled me. And it is hard. And I realised very soon that if you shun that narrative, what I didn't want to do was become everything that I hated on the opposite end. You know, you've got the angry far left screeching activists, and on the other side you've got angry screeching men's rights activists, and I'm neither. And then I'm in the middle. I'm actually a genuine centrist who doesn't see the difference between men and women. I think everyone should be judged on their character, and what their heart, really, what they bring to the table. Everyone stands on their own 2 feet. What you achieve is, it's every man and woman for themselves. It's you're never ever, and I know it because I've lived it, you are never ever disadvantaged because you're a woman. It's right. Bollocks. Anyone that says that, they're lying.
And so those views have put you in, even though you might be a centrist, at least closer friends with people on what some would say the right, conservative, Sky News After Dark, potentially Motley Crue. How you've had a kind of drawn out, I don't know how you'd say it, Twitter war with our friend Clementine Ford. I should try and get her on the podcast.
You should.
If she would do it. I don't know if she's about giving straight white males a platform, but if she is, she knows where to find me. How's that engagement been with kind of, she would be, what would you say, the leader of the Australian kind of feminist section?
I would say that she's the mascot. You know, she's the face of that brand, but never ever underestimate how widely connected and how deep and dark and sinister those connections run. You know, it's all very well being the fire brand. She's the front woman for that, but there's all sorts of crap that goes on behind the scenes, and that goes from controlling the media is a huge part of that. So the biggest threat to a fake narrative is someone that literally, it's like the emperor's new clothes, isn't it? It's literally like, clearly what you're saying is a complete pack of lies. That's their worst nightmare. So her pack came after me quite quickly, and I've remained a thorn in her side. And then, of course, when I was writing for Mark Latham, and what would that be now, 3 years ago?
When you say writing for Mark Latham, what does that mean?
So when Mark Latham left Sky and he started Mark Latham's Outsiders, he did his own show. which I did a few times, and then he was building his Facebook page, and so I would write some opinion stuff on there,
Right.
which is probably now in line with what I'm doing myself. It was kind of, I was finding my way probably. But obviously there are, as you say, much as I see myself as centre-right, if you're writing against the feminist narrative, then they label everyone as far-right. And then if you're writing for the Daily Telegraph, you're definitely far right. And if you're writing for the Spectator, you can just, jog on. You're absolutely as far right as any evil person could ever be. And then if you speak to Mark Latham, then that the world bursts into flames. So you kind of keep going down that path.
Yeah, you just can't help yourself.
Yeah.
Eating the forbidden fruit. So
exactly.
what are the issues you're following now? What are you talking about? What are you writing about? What are you passionate about? I've seen you covering, I think, some of family law court stuff.
Yes. Yeah, that's massive. And again, I think, how I said the first piece that I was...
Do you want to explain what that situation is for me and other low IQ individuals who don't know really what's going on?
I think it's an absolute hornet's nest, and I think, unfortunately, it's one of those hideous systems where if you haven't ever been involved with it, it's like lots of things in life. If you don't ever kick that hornet's nest, or you don't know someone, it's like the same as mental health. If you don't know someone who has, the wheels have fallen off and they've had loads of challenges, then you don't understand just how bad it is. But family law in this country and around the world is an absolute nightmare. And I, again, can speak from experience. I didn't know my father. So I was told from when I was very young that my father didn't want anything to do with me, which I now know is a case of parental alienation. I didn't get in touch with my father until I was 40. This is why I've got such a huge passion for this area, because I know that it happens. I know the narrative, again, the feminist narrative will try to tell you that men who don't see their children are all evil, nasty abusers and should never be allowed to see their children again. And I know that's not true because I've lived that. And I knew that my dad was never a bad person. So again, when I wrote about it for the first time, I got absolutely inundated with messages, and you really realise there is nobody who actually is doing the job of a journalist in this country. And I wrote a piece about the child support system, and again, you get all sorts of people complaining because they don't want any accountability. Family law is set up, definitely gender biased towards women. It means that good men and good fathers are alienated from their children. They're not allowed to see them. Court orders are not enforced. There's no perjury in family court, thanks to Julia Gillard. It absolutely has a direct impact on the mental health of men. And it's also obviously has the ripple-on effect and affects children, which I can, that's another side to my story. And did you know Pauline Hanson is the politician in this country who has been brave enough to try to push for this family law inquiry. And it's heartbreaking to see the feminist narrative that I've been tapping into. This all ties together. And it's all of the narrative around toxic masculinity and men. And it all, ultimately, it's about keeping control of children. It's about power. That's so yeah, family law is an absolute debacle. We've got this family law inquiry running at the moment, but of course we've got Larissa Waters from the Greens in there and Yuzali Stegel. So you can guess where this one's going. And then you've got the only champion of the people, Pauline Hanson, who is trying still desperately, because she has sons who've gone through this. People aren't lying. I literally would have, at one stage when I was writing a lot about family law and a lot about child support and how corrupt all of that system is, how long the legal process gets dragged out, you notice that your work in the media starts to decline because it becomes harder and harder to give you a platform because they get so many complaints.
Has it ever affected your like personal relationships with your friends?
Yeah. Yeah, it has. And that's hard too, to be honest. You know, so I think, look, there's ways not to swim along with the tide. Definitely, if you want an easy life, going along with the popular narrative is the way to go. If you're thinking for yourself, but you don't want to fall down the rabbit hole of the counter narrative, you're making your life really, really hard. And I think if you're trying to actually wave a bit of a flag and go, hang on a second, I think the wheels have come off this fight for equality. I've lost friends that I've had for 20 years, and some friends that I thought were friends only, you know, in this country more recently, who have said, just can't have anything to do with you and your views. It's, I find, of course, it's really, really hurtful, because I understand my own story, my experience with not knowing my father. I know that good men don't always get to see their children because I lived that. And I also know that I'm a good person, and I'm a good friend, and I'm fun. And it winds me up that we've got to such a situation now where you can't disagree with someone's politics, or if you do disagree with someone's politics, you therefore can't have them in your life. It's the opposite of tolerant. And then there's waves of anger that kind of come in there too, because it's like, well, you knew me as a person, you knew me as a friend, and now you're saying that because I write for this media outlet, you don't want me in your life. It's hurtful.
It is. I've started getting bits and pieces, touches of it.
Have you?
I mean, yeah, but I mean, you do have. I mean, at the end of the day, I think your most important relationship is probably with yourself, and you just have to be make sure that you're making yourself happy instead of making other people happy. I think so. That's what you got to do, then maybe that's what you got to do. There's my hot tip of the day for those at home who want a nugget of wisdom.
I didn't realise this was therapy.
Yeah, well, it might be. It might be. Well, you're 5 years off. Are you 5 years sober or 5 years non-alcohol, or is that
5 years sober in another couple of months?
Yeah, that's going to be exciting for you. You can celebrate.
Well, what am I going to do? Look what I've got today to drink. Sponsored by Redbull. This is my new Saturdays.
Fueling the alt-right, Redbull.
Exactly.
Well,
fueling my far-right wing.
Yeah. So you're going to does that make it tough to do celebrations of things? It'd be hard to do a celebration of being sober without. You could drink a Coke maybe.
Yeah, a mocha. Yeah,
it's been for you not drinking for that long.
I've got it now. It was incredibly. It's the hardest thing I've ever done. You know, I said to you that I've worked really hard for all of my promotions and everything that I've achieved in my life. I've worked really, really hard for, but none of that comes anywhere near, because I was a daily drinker for nearly 20 years and I was a high functioning alcoholic. So all of those glitzy, fancy jobs around the world and after parties and all of the shenanigans that were going on, there was a really dark side to that, which was essentially addiction. And the first year was incredibly, incredibly hard. I went into AA. I genuinely wanted to die. I didn't see a way forward at that point at all. And walking in through those doors of AA I was on my knees. It was like my last chance, I guess. And the first year, maybe even 2 years, were incredibly hard. And part of that is actually letting go. Part of that process is really letting go, because you have to let go of everything. Old patterns, old friendships. So when you're saying to me now, like, how will I celebrate 5 years? My life is so different now to old me. A celebration like that would have been, or I won't even say, it would have gone on for days. It would have been, the whole suburb would have been involved at one point.
Well, you've died on the cross and you've been reborn. You went through your
Ta-da!
tomb and you come out. That's good.
Yes, that's it.
Can I ask though, you don't have to answer if you don't want to, when you say you're drinking every day, was that like a social drink, or did you start drinking by yourself, or what happened there?
It started off social drinking, and because I had a job that was
Kind of required.
when I was on magazines, I was entertainment editor, and then I went to the Daily Mirror, and literally then I was part of 3 a.m, which were the party girls, and I would be going out to 3 or 4 events in a night, 5 nights a week, sometimes 6 nights a week. There was always something going on, and it was work, and the lines were very blurred for me. And I also, as entertainment editor, and I ran I had a section in the mag where, well, I had a sex column, and I had another part where I'd talk about booze, and so I got sent all this stuff. So I was always legitimately had a glass of something on my desk, and it's just the lines between work really blurred for me. And then I think the worse my drinking got, the less I did it outside my own home, because I knew that it was very, very dark and broken at that point. And when you're at that point, when you're getting out of work, catching a cab home, deciding how many bottles of wine to take home with you, and that becomes like you're not the person who is shiny and sparkly and sociably drinking at that point. You've completely crossed a line, lost control of it, and it was immense. And ultimately I had to give everything away at that point. I resigned at the top of my career, gave everything away. I gave all my stuff away. People were laughing. I'd lived in Darlinghurst in Sydney, and I gave all my stuff to some charity shops in Potts Point. They were saying there'll be some really good looking, there'll be some really well dressed strippers around the cross with all my like cast off clothes. I gave away my sofa. I gave away my TV. Like, it was just like Christmas. Gave away everything, and that was me hitting rock bottom.
It's a come to Jesus moment.
Exactly. The Phoenix.
The Phoenix, yeah. Well, I noticed on one of the Sky News segments I had a look at before you came on, you're talking about how politicians in particular don't really understand the mechanics of addiction. And it was in a segment about using like the welfare card.
Yes.
How would you say the government needs to look at dealing with addiction that's different from what they do currently?
Oh, that's such a massive question, isn't it? It's a huge question. I think there's probably 2 things I'd say to that. Anyone with any brains can see that if you're approaching drugs as the war on drugs, then we've absolutely lost it. What we've got to start doing is understanding why there is such a huge wave of this. It's all wrapped, in my opinion, it's all wrapped up with the state of mental health. And you look at America and you look at the opioid crisis over there, and you look at the amount that people are drinking and drugging or whatever. It all comes from the same place, and it all comes from a place of pain, where you're desperate to escape, and whatever your drug of choice is, that's just the gateway to getting out of your own head, out of your own life, and getting out of that. And so I guess that's my point about welfare cards. That the people who have a decent lifestyle and are sociably drinking, it's just not relevant to this conversation. But there is a point where, to be really serious about turning your life around, if you're spending all your money on drink and drugs, which lots of people do, and it becomes a trap, and it's the cycle of addiction mixed in with the career choice of welfare, you're never, ever, ever going to break that cycle. If someone has a card that they cannot use, it's the first step to opening a door, sitting down and having a conversation with someone to start to address all of those challenges. But you don't just suddenly, you know, it really winds me up when politicians try to talk about this and they have no personal I think probably the only politician who has had personal experience with this would be Jackie Lambie, who obviously has gone through it, you know, with her son, and she's been very outspoken about that. But it is a huge, you know how I said, like family law, that's a huge rabbit hole to go down. Addiction is another huge rabbit hole, and nobody really wants to begin to tackle it. I'm actually, now bringing it back to today, we're talking about isolation. I'm really, really concerned about what the next few months are going to do from a mental health point of view, a debt point of view, and then the domino effect that that has on mental health and addiction. And this all comes back to domestic violence again. Yes, there are some men who are the typical, stereotypical abuser, but there are lots of people in very dysfunctional relationships all across this country who are now going to be given money to buy booze or their substance of choice and literally be forced behind locked doors. I just think that there's so many strands of hell that this lockdown and the next few months have in store, and I don't think people have thought this through, that side of it.
Well, I haven't heard anyone talking about it like that before, and it does make some sense when you say it. Who's your you mentioned Pauline Hanson and Jackie Lambie. Do you have any other favourite politicians?
I really liked Cory Bernardi. Actually, do you know what that said? I like listening to him now on Sky, and not because it's Sky, but because I think he cuts to the chase and he speaks a lot of truth. The vast majority of politicians really do read from the script. It's spoon-fed, okay. And I don't even think that they have gone through the Phoenix process of working out what they genuinely believe. I don't think they've ever challenged it.
Well, I mean, we called up our local member to try and get him on the podcast, and he got he's in the cabinet. He can't really, take risks. He's got to follow the lines. I'm like, what are we paying this guy for? Like, I'm gonna fire him. I'm gonna walk down there as a member of the district and fire him. So I should be his boss. And I mean, if you can't handle the questions from a 21-year-old and you're in charge of the country, like, we got an issue. Like, if you can't trust yourself.
Well, do you know what? Politicians in isolation, they should all be speaking up. This is the time to have honest conversations. They should be connecting with everyone in their local area and actually putting the scripts to one side and being human beings. But there's too much at stake, isn't there? I talk about being a mouthpiece for a brand for so many years, and politicians are very much that. They're not allowed to think for themselves. So they're given a script, and that's what they sign up to. And that's why you've got to admire the people who don't toe that line and are brave enough to speak up for the truth.
Would you ever consider being a politician?
I keep being asked this. I think for the very reasons that we've just said. I don't ever want to have my wings clipped and be told what I can say and can't say. I'm far too feisty.
Is there a way for you to do it though without having to toe into line?
Maybe.
Because realistically, it seems to me like this is a common issue. And this is actually, if you watch an interview with Donald Trump about 20 years ago, he actually says the exact same thing. He said, we got a big tragedy where the best people don't want to go into politics because they see it for what it is. But we'd be much better off if those guys just bit the bullet and said, we're going to, dive into the swamp and fix it up instead of avoiding it and going into business or wherever else they decide to spend their creative energy.
It's interesting. And, there probably is something in it. I'm a great believer, I think, in I go through a period of time where I'll say yes to any opportunity that knocks on my door, and then I kind of deal with the consequences.
Yeah.
So who knows? I still think at heart I'm a media girl. I love writing. I'm really loving doing TV. I'm really enjoying like exploring doing podcasts and radio. Like I like all of that stuff. I like talking.
Okay. Well, when the media dogs come after the Carnage House, we can look for a piece in defence coming in the Spectator.
There you go. Perfect.
We are trying to see if we can get maybe that's something we'll talk about off camera. We're trying to see if we can dip our toes in a few different media cookie jars. We're trying to see if anyone wants to run a story on us, which they potentially may or not, even if it's a hit piece. Like I wouldn't mind a hit piece. Any publicity?
Be careful what you wish for, young man.
Any publicity, good publicity?
No, have that conversation with the blokes who run Blokes Advice. They kicked the same hornet's nest that I kicked, and the same people came after them. It's it's not fun.
I feel like I could handle. I feel like this is what you say before it happens, but I feel like I could handle some angry tweets and a few different things. But we'll have to wait and see what happens. But at some point,
you're up for kicking some hornet's nests.
Well, I've never been that cautious, stumbling on things, knocking things over, and maybe saying some things I shouldn't say. But we'll get there eventually. Now, what's the time now? Oh, we got plenty of time. You said you got an interview at 7, right?
Yeah.
Who are you doing? Which show? I mean.
It's a UK thing, which I can't say too much about.
Oh right.
Just a little chat.
Just a little chat. Are they?
Yeah.
Are they?
And then later, I'm doing Sky News. I'm doing tomorrow's papers.
That's a lot.
It is a lot.
Which show on Sky?
The Front Page. I love it. You get a whole hour. You get to really get into some issues.
You do. So what would you stay on for the whole hour?
Yeah. I love it. I really love it. Because sometimes when you're on a panel, you don't get that much time to talk. Like you're there to be a different voice, a different face, and drop in a few one-liners, and then that's it. And then they go to an outbreak, and you're off. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. Well, obviously, because when I was looking at some of the Sky clips on YouTube, they're obviously only single segments. But it's one of the issues. It's one of the things I do like about podcasts is that you actually get to extend things out a little bit more without having to go to like a commercial break or something. But that's obviously me just ripping on normal TV. And if I've got a chance to go on normal TV, I might probably take it. I'll take that line for the minute. What do you like about?
Why don't you come up with like a Corona initiative? Like think about something that you can do.
I just want to be famous for being famous, though. Like when you don't have to. You just go to the gym and take photos, and you're just famous for being famous.
You can do that.
Yeah.
Don't knock it.
Oh mate, I don't knock it. If an opportunity presented itself. But what do you like about the TV? What do you like about what are you only doing? Sky, or would you do other TV? Would you go on like 10 or 9 or something? Would you go on the project? I'd
absolutely love to. And a few years ago, would it be a couple of years ago, there was a movie out called The Red Pill, and the director of that movie, Cassie J, was in the country. I met her, and she went on the project, and they completely stitched her up.
Yeah,
I've written some probably not particularly nice things about the project because it sums up the enemy to me.
Yeah.
And they're people your age, they have a young demographic, but they're not talking to them about things that are relevant. And they talk about reading from scripts. The project are dreadful at that. But I would go on the project. Yes. I've been asking to go on the drum for nearly 2 years. And nothing. Then they don't want to give anyone who doesn't read from the scripts. They just don't want to give them a platform.
Well, you just have to beat them the old-fashioned way. We have to get eyeballs on the front page, on the Bolt Report, Credlin, wherever you are. Get them on the Carnage House too.
There you go.
Maybe you need to tell us maybe at some point how we actually build our social medias and stuff. I feel like that's something you're good at.
I love it. Yes.
We can make that work. Teamwork makes the dream work. Now, what have
you got like a list of cheesy phrases that you have to throw in?
Oh, guys, make sure if you like these interviews, subscribe to our channel. And also thanks to our patrons who are giving us money. If you really like us, you can give us some money on patreon.com. And then there's a bit more housekeeping at the end. I'm always supposed to say that at the start of the videos now. We had a meeting on the weekend and my brothers. We're like, we should say subscribe at the start of the video instead of the end because people probably already clicked off by that point. So you say it at the front. But I forgot to. I always forget. What are you going to do though? What are you going to do?
Oh, brilliant. I don't know. But yeah, social media, I think it's really important. And again, it's all part of it. It's my background. It's brands, it's all, I guess it's a little bit of media background, a bit of marketing, a little bit of advertising. It's all of that. But you've got to first of all work out what your message is. And then, what your brand stands for, what are your brand values, and then literally drip feed it several times a day. You've got to just keep on drip, 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 drip.
Our next interview won't be public. It'll just be us asking you social media questions.
That's fine. We can do that.
We'll just loop you into it and pretend it's an interview.
Yeah, we can do that.
Drag you there.
That's fine.
Oh, I appreciate that. Because we're going to get, because you help, once we get famous too, we'll help you out as well.
You're going to drag me along with you.
Yeah, you come up, we bring our
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Well, look, where can people find you? I think you're very active on Facebook and Twitter. So when people want to see what Corrine's got to say, where do they go?
So yes, Corrine Baraclough Writer. That's my Facebook page, which is always ranking. I try to post most days on there. And then Twitter is tweet Corrine B. And then you can also weekly in the Spectator, sometimes in the Daily Telegraph, and most weeks something or other on Sky News.
Yeah. Weekly Twitter feud as well, if you're interested.
Oh, you want me to get into the boxing ring? Yeah, I can do that. Roll up my sleeves.
Yeah. And well, we'll leave those links in the description. It's been fun talking to you, Corrine.
Thanks for having me.
Anytime. I hope we'll do it again soon.
Yeah, I look forward to it. Tuck into that whiskey. Have a drink for me.
Don't tempt me.
See you soon.